Hello and a warm welcome to Connecting Voices panel, a space where we go beyond policies and procedures to explore the real world challenges of creating safe and respectful workplaces. My goal in starting this panel discussion series was simple: to bring together POSH practitioners, industry leaders, and frontline change makers to share their insights, confront tough questions, and inspire fresh thinking. Because when we truly listen to each other, we don't just solve problems, we prevent them. Building on the success of our pre COVID program on mental health in POSH, this year's series is delving into various aspects of the POSH Act and more. Hi, I'm Yamuna Chengappa. I've been working as a corporate lawyer for more than 2 decades and work as an external member on the internal committees of leading organizations and few NGOs pan India. Over the past decade, I've handled more than 300 POSH inquiries, including deeply sensitive, complex cases. I've conducted over 500 awareness sessions in English, Kannada, and Hindi. My intent is to make complex ideas accessible and to empower people to ask the right questions. Now, in our previous panel discussion, we had covered topics like basics of POSH and best POSH practices of organizations. In today's panel discussion, we we are going to look at work from home and return to work and its implications on POSH. Let me now introduce you to our esteemed panelists. Mr. Shiv Kumar is a seasoned HR and business leader with over 2 decades of experience driving strategic growth and transformation across global organizations. His expertise spans diverse sectors, including oil and gas, utilities, telecom, and pharmaceuticals. Currently heading human resource at Merck India, Shiv has previously worked with leading companies such as Lowe's Inc., Wells Fargo, and Wipro. A strong advocate of responsible diversity and inclusion, Shiv believes it to be a catalyst for innovation and resilience. He also serves as a country sponsor of the I Am Proud ERG at Merck. Academically, he holds a postgraduate degree in HR and L&D and is a certified expert in talent strategy from Wharton. He is also a ProSci certified change practitioner, Aon certified total reward specialist, and a PCC certified coach accredited by the International Coaching Federation. Now, our other panelist is our very own in-house Sashite Shweta Bhatt. Shweta Bhatt is a psychological counselor and POSH consultant with extensive experience across industries. Her work and volunteer engagements revealed a common thread: widespread issues around sexual harassment and boundary violations at the workplace. Now, this led her to focus on gender equity, consent, and appropriate professional conduct. At Sasha, she serves as an external member on the internal committee of over 30 organizations, supporting inquiries and offering guidance that blends procedural rigor with psychological insight. She has conducted awareness sessions and capacity building workshops in English, Hindi, and Kannada for employees, HR teams, and IC members. Shweta believes personal beliefs and biases shape workplace behavior, and she encourages open discussions around these themes in her sessions. She has also hosted Voice the Sasha Podcast, a podcast dedicated to workplace equality and harassment prevention. Welcome, both of you. Now, the pandemic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The pandemic has redefined where and how we work. It has also pushed us to revisit how we define workplace safety, especially from a POSH lens. So let's begin by understanding how our panelists have seen this transition impact policy and practice. So, hi Shiv, this question is for you. How has the shift to remote or hybrid models impacted your organization's approach to POSH?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question to start with because in physical offices or spaces, we know what are the risk zones. It could be a conference room, it could be a cubicle, meeting room, or even offsite trips. It could be, let's say, cabs, so on and so forth. So we know what the risk zones look like. But when we speak about online, moving to hybrid, moving to online, virtual kind of a setting, the risk is very, if I may call it, amorphous. It does not have a form, it does not have a shape. And that's where organizations are struggling. I would say every organization is struggling because that is become very, very critical. Now, the critical question that we need to answer is not about where work happens anymore, but how power and vulnerability are experienced in spaces which may not be physical. And that's where the shift is taking place. And I think every organization is trying to understand that as we go. I think that's the biggest shift in my view. Now, there is a need to reframe the way we view POSH as well in this particular context. Because at the end of the day, is it a compliance measure? Yes, it's a compliance measure. It will continue to remain a compliance need, and that we cannot take away from. But most importantly, what we need to look at is what is that continuum from a psychological safety perspective, and that is where the challenge is. So what did we see? We see that intent and impact would is that conversation will continue, but it is going to go beyond, let's say, state boundaries. It's going to go beyond country boundaries, so on and so forth. Employees, working with folks across, or they themselves moving across geographies, right? So I think that was one of the biggest challenge that we looked at. And the other thing is that right now it is about no more spatial, it is about relational. I think that is what we are experiencing more and more. And also the fact that when we are in rooms, we are able to see body language and understand what is happening. But over Zoom calls and Teams, it's very difficult to understand what consent means and what is a form of consent. Is it language? Is it a nod? What does consent really mean? So I think that is becoming very, very difficult. And hence, the definition of a safe space is becoming more difficult to, I would say, in many ways, change. So what did we do? We re-looked at our policies itself. We looked at the way we conduct our training programs, so on and so forth. We added the whole definition of, let's say, the workplace into it, extending it to outside of physical spaces. So I think once we bring in that element, the entire conversation changes. So that's been the biggest shift for us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Very succinct answer. I was just looking at what you were saying about it going beyond boundaries, because when it's a physical, when it's tangible and physical, these are the four walls, and this is where it ends, or this is where it begins and ends. But like you rightly called out, when it's virtual, when it's online, it can go beyond the state, beyond the country. uh, I've been part of cases where a person sitting in Bangalore has at the same time reached out to four different women in four different locations, two in India and two in two international geographical locations. And the way it was very interesting to see how each of these people um, reacted to the whole thing, right? It was the same operation that he used. He used the same dialogues and the same messages to all of them. I guess he had a limited script, but the way the women reacted was very different. Two of them filed a complaint immediately. Two of them gave him some leeway because they thought it was a cultural thing. So it was very interesting to see. And that happened because it was virtual. I guess if it had happened, like you rightly called out, in a physical premises, I don't think they would have thought this is, cultural. They would have said, hey, this is not okay. So very interesting. Thank you so much. Shweta, so I have a question for you. We're talking about the virtual workplace and how, the lines are blurred between personal and professional, official channels and informal, ones. So, Shweta, how do we define workplace in a remote or a hybrid context under the POSH Act?
Yeah. So let's go to the way workplace is defined in the POSH Act. So Section 2 of the POSH Act basically says a workplace includes any place visited by or that the employee is in because or during the course of employment, right? Yeah. So that is basically how we look at the workplace. So that would originally be the premises, the actual campus, the physical campus, and the extended workplace, which is any transportation provided by the company, team outings, team dinners, etc. Right? But because the law has provided this very intentionally broad definition, evolving workplaces, non-traditional workplaces also kind of come under it. So what do I mean by that? Because it says any place arising because of the employees there or traveling there, it comes, the hybrid work environments or remote work environments also kind of it gets included in this. So what would that mean? So in a remote or a hybrid work setup, it would mean digital work platforms like, for example, Zoom, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, of course, but also any kind of project management collaboration systems like you have Slack or Trello, etc. And of course, email and company chat. It would also mean home offices. So some companies would even sponsor the home office setup of employees, but even, for example, remote work locations. I know of organizations that have leased remote work locations for their employees, where one employee or maybe two employees go there because it's nearer for them. It would also be virtual social uh, atmospheres, right? So online team building activities, or as they would call virtual happy hours, company WhatsApp or Telegram groups. That all of these would come under that, and of course any other employer-provided digital spaces. So some companies have their own internal social media platforms or virtual discussion boards. So all of these examples that I have given would come under the current definition as the law provides it of the workplace, because of the intentionally broad definition that the law has provided. Apart from this, of course, we do look at an incident that has not happened in an employer provided or an employer sponsored virtual or physical workspace, but we then also look at then what is the relationship to the workplace. Were they two team members who work together? The incident has happened somewhere completely outside or in a non-organizational setup virtually, but it causes a hostile work environment. It affects the workplace in some way, or it causes retaliation
So,
in the work.
Shweta, from what you're saying, sorry to interrupt. So, suppose, say, I am, A and B are employees, colleagues, and A goes to B's, say, Instagram or any of those online platforms and comments about B's appearance or attire and says, oh my God, this is, you're looking very sexy or hot, or using inappropriate sexually colored language. And this is on their personal platform. I know
Yeah.
we are digressing from return to work, but I would still like this address because I'm sure some of our
Yeah,
listeners
of
will be
course.
interested. So
Yeah.
can we then come and file a complaint against say at the workplace because
Yeah,
they speak?
it would be the IC will look at what is the connection to the workplace. So these are two colleagues who work together, or maybe a manager and a subordinate, or a team lead and team member. Because of the working relationship that they have, there is already probably an impact of that incident in their working relationship, or there can be a potential impact. And if so, that is the connection to the workplace that will satisfy it, and we will be able to take it up as a complaint of sexual harassment. And this is one of the biggest sort of misconceptions or questions that employees have when we
Exactly.
talk to them,
Yes.
is that what if somebody messages me on my social media and they have searched me there because they found I'm their colleague, right?
Yes.
And we work together and they've made such comments, and that would definitely come under the workplace because of the relationship to the workplace.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Shiv, since you are in this space and you've been handling some of these things, have you come across any cases in maybe your previous company or any of the any other place where you thought that or you saw that this was something that came about, like where a virtual space was used to harass another colleague? And if you have any insights on it, it'll be really great to hear you about.
Yeah, I think we are seeing this more post-COVID, during COVID and post-COVID, scenarios is what we see. There's an increase. It was very interesting when Shweta was, narrating it so beautifully. I was thinking that, perhaps when the law was written, it was written mostly for, let's say, cabins and,
Yeah.
water coolers and, those kind of scenarios. But then somewhere it was not clear. And I think Shweta put it very beautifully, as much as it is broad, but then was it written for WhatsApp messages? Was it written for Instagram or Facebook? Perhaps somewhere, that kind of ambiguous or where the blurred work-life boundaries were not considered in a very concrete manner.
Mm.
But since it was left in such a broad manner, it also covers areas exactly like what, Shweta mentioned. But does it translate that easily? When we speak of workplaces, I would doubt so. And I don't think that, people still understand that, I mean, the example that you gave in terms of Instagram could otherwise be perceived as, sexual harassment, as well, as much as Instagram is not used for official purposes, right? So I think that was a very good one. But what we are seeing is that there is this psychological ambiguity in the minds of employees as well. What
Yeah.
they are, what they often ask us is what counts and what does not count as harassment in these on these platforms or in these environments. So that is the biggest challenge that we see when cases are reported. For example, let's say flirtatious messages over WhatsApp one-on-one, or over Instagram messages, Facebook messages. I mean, do they constitute, let's say, poor boundaries, so to say? Um, I think what we are seeing is uh, meaning needs to be constructed in the context. I think that's the most important aspect. And while law may offer a structure, the context is very important. And that's what we are trying to get our employees to understand more and more. And that's where it becomes very, very difficult. Our IC tries, quite a bit, not just in this organization, but in all other organizations that I have seen. What are the power equations? I mean, is it about platforms anymore? It could be any platform. There are some platforms we are not even aware of. Our policy doesn't even like call it out clearly.
Yeah.
Newer platforms are coming up. So, for example, I was reading somewhere that if I have, what's that called? If I have an account on Bumble, and if I were to put that somebody's profile on the, let's say, speak about that profile at work, is that sexual harassment or not? Do I take that conversation that I've had with that individual over Bumble and speak about it at work? I don't know whether that, constitutes or not, because it's personal
Yeah.
space at the end
So
of the
what we
day,
see is
right?
a huge blurring of lines.
Exactly, right? So I'm just saying,
Yeah.
Tinder, it's supposed to be personal. Bumble, it's supposed to be personal. But then now, do I bring it back to work? What's the relationship between two individuals?
Yeah.
So I think those psychological ambiguities is what is creating a challenge. So I think that's one. The second one is, of course, intention and impact that continues to be the cornerstone of what we continue to
Absolutely.
look at. I mean, of course, narrative sensitivity is going to be very, very important in this particular context. What was the context in which, that conversation came up. So yes, to answer your question, there are loads of it. There are loads of platforms which are coming up. Like Bumble, for example, people ask us that, it is the woman who needs to approve you
Yeah.
for the conversation to begin. Then how is it that's consent? Right. So I think it's just getting
Yeah.
complicated. Again, that's the whole thing about, what is the context in which we are discussing it? It's just getting complicated for the IC folks on a lighter note.
Very, very interesting take, Shiv, and very, I mean, mind-boggling cases that you put forward. But I think as long as we remember not to cross the other person's personal boundaries. I think some things are written in stone, whether it is the virtual space or it is the physical space. Some things are written in stone, and some things, of course, we'll have to read into the law and into what the courts are looking at, and then maybe arrive at a conclusion. So, on the same topic, Shweta, have you noticed any new or evolving forms of sexual harassment in the virtual workspace?
Yeah.
Just going ahead with what she was saying.
Yeah, I think Shiv has kind of brought up one or two points that I was going to mention anyway, which is amazing. I was going to mention a typical, this is not uncommon now to receive complaints where somebody has seen somebody else on a dating profile, and then there has been either an unwelcome advance because they have seen them, or there has been some sort of a, spreading the, making up rumors about that person which are sexual in nature. And one thing that I wanted to say about Bumble especially is, with Bumble it gets even more blurry, because there is Bumble for dating, but then there's also Bumble for friendship, and then there's Bumble for business partners. And there is a blurring of the person and the professional. And what I've seen, and it's very interesting to me, is that especially the pandemic, I think, was a catalyst to this. It was already happening before the pandemic, of course, but during the pandemic, a lot of organizations had to suddenly adjust to a completely remote situation. And it was quite a learning curve for many organizations and for many employees. And one very sort of common example of this is that earlier, when people used to sit in the same cubicle, perhaps if they had a question, they would probably call out, or they would go to the other person's cubicle and say, ask the question. That was easier than, say, shooting a mail maybe, or shooting a message. But now, because of 2 years of a different way of interacting, where that is not possible, that was replaced in large part by, yes, official communication channels like Microsoft Chat, etc., but also by WhatsApp.
Yes.
I have had employees who tell me that, you know what, if I have to just shoot a quick question, I need a quick answer, and I need to get on with my work, I'd rather, just type it in my phone and then ask the question, work-related question, and I'll get an answer. And that has led to a certain blurring of the lines also, in the sense that two colleagues might be having a non-work related conversation about, what their plans are for the weekend, and then have a work related conversation, and then go back to the non-work related conversation. And of course, this also plays a huge role in when it comes to boundary violations, because often people, either, of course, without realizing it, but also a lot of times because might be a certain disregard for consequences, or feeling that they will not be called out, etc. There is a certain sort of boundary violations. There's a certain not understanding consent. So somebody saying hi and initiating a conversation in Bumble even is not consent for any kind of further activity. So those nuances are something that we continue to kind of hopefully I see us making a very small dent each time we sensitize. For example, newer methods do come up, and especially now with AI and deep fakes and avatars. I only actually shudder to think what new forms of
It's
boundary
basically getting
violations.
more complicated than easy.
Yes. And now it might be what we might see is something like this: somebody making an unwelcome advance in WhatsApp, or checking out Instagram, or sharing someone's dating profile, or taking screenshots of someone without their consent, and then making a meme out of it, which was a recent sort of a situation. And of course, as long as if it's unwelcome, if the impact of it has been unwelcome, it has made someone uncomfortable, and it is sexual in nature, that would all come under the workplace from the context of the connection to the workplace, right? What is the working relationship, right? But as workplaces evolve even more, and it gets, as Shiv said, cross borders and cross countries, maybe it will only get more and more complicated in context.
Yes.
Even though I'm thinking it might get covered by the broad definition of the act, as Shiv said.
Yeah, overall, I think the law does. If you can look like, for example, the simple example is the definition of workplace. If you look at it in a very, very narrow manner, it is just the four walls, the brick and mortar company. But it has, we have a couple of judgments that have gone beyond it. So, like I said, the case where we had complainants across the border, we could still look into it because the definition of workplace has gone beyond those borders.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so the POSH Act does allow for that, I think deliberately allows for that fluidity. So, Shiv, I have a question for you, in continuation to what we are talking. Have you seen any kind of ambiguities or compliance gaps when it comes to these remote interactions?
Oh, yes. I would say, yes, absolutely. We do see that, I mean, there are a lot of challenges that come across. I'll give you a small example, especially in digital spaces, what we see is you would have seen that when there are chats and then what is that called? Emojis, you have the red heart emoji. Yeah. So now, I didn't know what a red heart emoji or a purple heart emoji or a yellow heart emoji really meant. I always use a red heart emoji, thinking that it means that I love the response or things like that.
Right.
Now, that is, for folks who understand me, know me, that they say that, okay, fine, it's perfectly fine, right? Now, if there is somebody who's new who may not understand, what I'm meaning when I have the red heart emoji, now that's a big, red flag. So
Yeah.
I think that is where we see that there are issues that come up. One part is compliance. The second part is actual, implementation and, in spirit, so on and so forth. So we do, see that big time. Now, going back to what Shweta was mentioning, it is difficult. One part is that, okay, was everything, recorded well? Did we follow the process? So on and so forth. Yes, we follow the process, etc. And like what we were discussing just before this as well, is there are nuances from a culture perspective. There are nuances, from an individual psychology perspective, etc. Those are elements that somewhere as organizations we miss. Uh, I think we need to remove or de-shame the survivor in many ways, from
Yeah.
a psychology perspective. We need to also look at, okay, is it a compliance thing? Did we do something about what is the impact from a psychology perspective on the individual? If there was a fake case or not a genuine case, what did we do in that particular scenario? I think there are a lot of these elements. One easy fix is we go back and say the law says this, we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
Great, you do that. But I think it is just more than the, compliance. And when we speak with people, they come back and say, yes, you did a great job. The investigation happened. You did awareness sessions, so on and so forth. But is it adequate? No. We are missing out on peeling the onion. We're missing out on the psychological impact of that on the individual. Sometimes we also miss out on the power dynamics that are involved. So I think there are a lot of elements which we tend to overlook, and there is a need to look at it certainly more than just compliance.
Fantastic. So basically, what you're trying to say is our job doesn't stop with just investigating matter and then coming to a conclusion. That is just half the battle won or done. There's more to it, like looking at the other facets. Like, for example, if I can think about it, when you talked about psychological impact, we generally think it is the complainant who's going through a psychological impact. But we've also seen respondents who've been in a very bad state. And at the end of the day, they're all our employees, right? It's not that this is a hardened criminal who's come in and now he's sexually harassing people, generally. Uh, and then there is the bystanders and the witnesses who have also been impacted and there's a psychological impact on them. So fantastic insight into that. Thank you so much. So how should organizations, and this, both of you, either of you can answer this, how should organizations respond to complaints involving harassment in the personal digital spaces that stem from workplace relationships? It could be maybe consensual relationships gone sour, or it could be they're just colleagues, but one person has overstepped. So how should organizations respond to such complaints?
Shweta, would you like to go first? Then I'll follow.
Okay, sure. I just wanted to say that I think foundationally, a lot of the times things that happen virtually, because I think it is so normalized in society. receiving an unwanted sexual text or picture on your Facebook or on your Instagram is seen as this happens. And when it happens in a workplace context, even though the impact of it might be different because it's a colleague sending you, it is seen as somehow seen as less than a physical instance of sexual harassment, an in-person instance. I think foundationally, from the top down, I feel it needs to be taken seriously. It needs to be seen as much of a sexual harassment complaint or an incident as somebody touching someone inappropriately. And a lot of people, employees also sort of get into this sort of misconception where they see it as a personal issue. Something that's happening to me on my social media or on my WhatsApp is a personal issue. So they also find it difficult to sometimes report it because of that barrier. And we have seen team members or even managers being unwilling to get involved because they also sort of see it as a personal issue and they feel, how can we, how much can we encroach, etc. So I think the foundational thing of what organizations should do, what ICs and senior leadership should do is to take it seriously. And there needs to be like a robust mechanism that includes and is inclusive to complaints that come from, of course, in-person situations, but also from remote working situations, right? Assuring seriousness and the attention and respect it deserves regardless. And another point that I wanted to make was regarding sensitization. Awareness programs that talk about the virtual aspects of the ways in which sexual harassment can manifest. Even if there might not have been an intention to hurt or harass, are very much the need of the hour. And not only sensitization to the employees, but also specifically targeted sensitization to team leads and managers, because a lot of the times, especially with remote working employees, their first point of contact tend to be their, senior, the senior, basically. They're the team lead, the mentor, the manager, or sometimes the skip level manager. And how they respond, even in a micro way, not just about, of course, I'll connect you to the committee or but how their face, their body language, and how they respond is often a make or break in such cases for the employee, for the aggrieved. And if they feel somewhere, they believe that, oh, this is virtual, this has happened, it's not our concern, or is this not as much as, it's not sexual harassment. And then, of course, it shows up in the way they hold space for the aggrieved. And that can really harm, and demotivate the person, right? So these are two main points that I see. But I'm curious to hear from Shiv as well.
Yeah, I think Shweta, covered, a lot of important elements. When when you were speaking about, relationship having gone south, for example, right? It's a tricky one. Because there was a consensual relationship in the past, and now let's say, it may have gone sour. So there are two or three things that, we do. One is, of course, sharing. When I say sharing, disclosing consensual relationships amongst colleagues is something that we encourage at the workplace so that we know that it was consensual. And if it ended at a later date, that was also consensual. But more importantly, is getting our employees to understand, or any organization getting their employees to understand that, consent once is not consent always. I think that is the point that we need to drive home, that maybe it was consensual at one point in time, but now it is no more. So if we were to get that message right, and that's the nuance of the conversation, if we get that message right, and if we get individuals to understand that, I think a lot of the stuff that we are speaking about will auto take care of itself. And I think that is what we need to be doing, because most of the times what happens is that, consent, in a physical kind of a space seems easier, but in the case of a virtual setting is very difficult. And that is by constantly mentioning that, consent once is not consent always is a message that I would lay emphasis on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for really, really interesting, insightful points, both of you. Um, so I have a follow-up question for that. I'm sorry, I'm bombarding you with questions, but we're trying to get as much information from both of you because you come with that know-how. So, Shiv, this is for you. Has work from home made it harder for employees to report sexual harassment? Do you see that, like you was talking about COVID, when you saw an increase in the virtual space sexual harassment, do you see that the complaints kind of dipped during that time because of what reasons you may have want to share, or did you see it was pretty much the same? And Shweta, you can follow that up with your own experience as a external member. Shiva, over to you.
I would agree with you. When it came to remote work, it dips because again, going back to my earlier point, and Shweta was also speaking about it. What is the definition of sexual harassment in the case of a virtual setting? And I think employees are still understanding, where it starts, where it ends, or is there an end, or is there a start? Is it a continuation? Is it a continuum? I think that confusion still remains in the minds of employees to a great extent. Now through our sensitization sessions, so on and so forth, we are also educating. For example, if I had let's say, a very inappropriate background during this conversation, it's my personal space, one. Secondly, it is not even real. So does that constitute sexual harassment when you are looking at my background, which technically does not exist? Now, I may say that, it does not exist. Right. So now, does it start? Where does it start? Where does it end? But now, of course, the law is very clear in terms of what it constitutes and what it does not. But then, as an employee, one doubts that one, it does not exist in the case of a virtual setting. Second, forget the virtual background. I have an inappropriate picture on the wall behind me.
Yeah.
That's my personal space. Why you to question, what I should put up on my wall and what I should not put up on my wall. Right. So I think people are still getting, and if my team member is looking at that inappropriate picture on the wall behind me, there is power dynamics. So Shiv's house has an inappropriate picture in the background when he takes calls, may spread in the team, but that's his personal space, according to the conventional definition of spaces. But in the context of this, it is not, because I am bringing that space to a work setting, which otherwise is virtual. But now getting to that point where I understand as an employee that that is a workspace setting is a question in itself. And that becomes a challenge from reporting of cases in many, many cases, whether it is, a woman reporting, man reporting, person from the LGBTQ, community reporting, so on and so forth. So I think that's the biggest thing that we are seeing in terms of understanding the definition of what a workplace looks like. That's one. Second is in terms of evidence, because what happens is that at a physical workspace, there are people who overhear conversations, there are CCTV cameras, but in this kind of an environment, there's nothing. So how does one now look at, okay, is there evidence? Is there no evidence? Does it become easy for a perpetrator in that particular case to do what he or she, wants to do? So I think it just becomes complex. So employees are also very, I would say, not convinced or not comfortable reporting those cases in the absence of clarity. So I know it was a complex answer to, a simple question of yours, but I just wanted to give you the nuance
No,
of
no, no, it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. It makes a lot of sense. You've gotten some very good points. You're talking about evidence in the virtual, evidence with regard to sexual harassment in the virtual space, and I'm sure it is a challenge, right? If we both are in on a call and I misbehave with you over the call, there's nobody else. It's just you and me on the call. So how do you prove that no, Yamuna did misbehave with me? It's next to impossible. Um, but yes, like I said, we have to, we have to apply the same standards, how we look at the virtual space or the real space, and look at it through maybe circumstantial evidence. And Also, when you see most of the cases, you see that it's not a one-off that happens. There may be a series of events that may have led up to this. So we look at all of that. But like you rightly called out, it is definitely more challenging when it becomes virtual space. So during COVID, I actually thought during COVID that we most probably will shut shop. I mean, how can you end up sexually harassing anybody, right? You're not in front of them. You're not, what do you say to somebody who's not in front of you? But then we continued to work right through. I think all our colleagues were working right through. There was so much of blurring of lines. We had from simple to complex cases, and everything was virtual. And it was it was mind-boggling that actually you could end up uh, sexually harassing somebody virtually in pretty much the same way that you can end up harassing them in the live spaces. So
Absolutely.
thank you for that.
I mean, I just want to add, one interesting
Yeah.
debate that we were having, and that
Yeah.
is there was this Khajuraho painting in the
Mm.
caves behind, and we know, what we're speaking about. So is that appropriate or is that inappropriate? Because it's a painting behind me. Now,
Yeah.
if somebody is looking at that painting from the other side, well, it is, what I am seeing. But Khajuraho painting is it questionable? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. See, those are the things, right? So, but it comes down to do you really need to show that on a work call? It's your personal space, but like you rightly said, this is your professional space. The moment you switch on the camera, it becomes a professional space. I was part of this discussion on a group where there was this retired judge who came on a call regarding POSH, right? He was giving a sermon on POSH. And the people who were attending were all external members and other people, maybe from IC and all that. And he had a picture behind him, and one of the participants actually took a screenshot and put it in the group and said, "Hey, am I seeing things, or is that a nude picture behind him?" And all of us said, "Yes, that is a nude picture." And it just felt obscene. And the topic itself was on POSH, right? It was on prevention of sexual harassment. And here it is, this speaker has this picture. And she was quite mortified. She was embarrassed, but she didn't do anything about it, obviously, because it's not a workplace per se. But it does affect you. It does make you feel uncomfortable. During COVID, we've had cases where people have switched on their videos, and I remember one of my colleagues saying that two people had actually met up in one of their houses, and she was sitting on his lap and kissing him. They didn't know the video was on. They didn't know that people were looking at them because they were on mute. And people who logged in early could see it, and they started screaming. They're like, "Hey guys," and they were moving their hands. And finally, after 5-10 minutes of that, unpaid show, they realized that people are moving their hands, and the girl realized, she ran off. If the other people had raised it as a complaint of sexual harassment, it is a valid complaint of sexual harassment, because under our law, intent does not matter, impact does. And of course, by reasonable standards of a woman or reasonable standard of a person. So yeah, thank you. Fantastic discussion. I'm really enjoying this discussion. I hope the participants also enjoying this discussion. So Shweta, following up on, we're looking at the remote places, remote working places, and we're looking at people returning to work. But what are the challenges that the IC is facing while conducting inquiries virtually? Because I know now we are not in COVID, but people are still working remotely. We are still having hybrid. We have employees working across India, and most of the cases which we are handling, I'm speaking for myself, I'm sure I'm speaking for you also, I think most of it is virtual. So, what are the challenges, especially with regard to, say, witness examination, confidentiality, documentation? If you could just throw some light from your practice.
Yeah. I'd love to talk about that. But before that, I just wanted to say that the conversation between you and Shiv reminded me of, I don't know if you remember, right in the middle of the pandemic, there was that whole viral Shweta thing that happened. It was a viral video of somebody named Shweta who doesn't know her audio is on and she's just talking about something.
Yes.
Yeah, and the amount of memes I have received
Memes.
because my name is Shweta
Yeah.
on that.
I think there were a lot of such memes. Not just Shweta, there was a lot of such memes because people didn't know the videos are on. They're not aware, and it was hilarious after. It was hilarious
After the fact, but
after the
yeah,
fact,
yeah,
but
but I did wonder about, what about, let's say, the poor girl who was, who was
yes,
talking, the
yes,
embarrassment that she would have faced, or somebody who felt that conversation was not appropriate, the
yes,
discomfort, etc. So coming back to the ICs, of course, just like the employees facing extra challenges in
mm,
reporting a grievance, with remote workplaces or hybrid workplaces, as the case may be, ICs also face, there are some additional things that we'll need to sort of remember or kind of take into considerations. Of course, as Shiv mentioned in a previous, a few minutes ago, about not being able to read non-verbal cues in a virtual inquiry,
yeah,
actually can be quite a setback, because as I see, when we meet with the complainant, when we meet with the respondent witnesses, we are not only, of course, hearing them out, but we are also sort of looking at them and sensing their body language and picking up on certain cues, which will help us then ask follow-up questions in our inquiry.
yeah,
And in a virtual setup, of course, it's a best practice to keep video on for this reason. But even with the video, really below this, level, we really can't see what's
we
going
don't know
on.
what's
Some,
happening. Yeah,
somebody might be really calm in the face, but maybe they are, squeezing their hands or like wringing their hands. That is the way they are expressing anxiety,
yeah,
and we might not be able to pick that up. So we've had issues with that. We've had issues about enforcing attendance, people not turning up even though they have been summoned. uh, and because it's remote, there is that the in-person touch isn't there. Sometimes adherence to instructions can be a little difficult because we are all humans, and I think we all kind of fall prey to this. Internet issues, of course, goes without saying. Issues where people have trouble getting on, but then they get on, but they have trouble switching on the video, etc. Sensitive conversations generally can be quite tough when it is virtual.
yes,
And with POSH inquiries, the conversations are almost always sensitive. And so it's crucial for the IC also, because we are also logging in sometimes either partially virtually or fully virtually. IC
yeah,
members are also logging in from different locations. IC needs to be on the same page and work as a team. And that can also be challenging in a remote situation. Of course, confidentiality can be a huge concern. Who is in the room when you're speaking to a witness or a party? Who is in the room? Are they using recording devices? Is there a potential sort of possibility of a leak or a hacking incident? Um, of course, this brings me to one of the biggest questions that people ask with when looking at virtual inquiries is documentation. They whether to sort of record the session or not record the session, and then what are the ramifications of recording the session. And generally, what we say is to kind of, one, it's important to take consent from everyone, and the consent has to be freely given. And sometimes there can be a power dynamic situation, even with the IC, where the person feels compelled to say, yes, yeah,
yes.
yes, you can record it, but has it been freely given? So these are some major concerns that, along with the other challenges that the committee faces, specifically because of virtual or a hybrid sort of workplace.
Thank you, Shweta. Absolutely agree with your points. In the interest of time, I'm not going to talk much. I will move on to Shiv because I have an interesting question and I'm hoping for an interesting answer. So, Shiv, you heard Shweta speak. So, question for you is: how can HR and people managers proactively identify and address POSH-related concerns when informal interactions have reduced? Because see, there's a gently employees go to the HR or to the manager as a first point of contact when they face issues. But now with remote working, all of us know that the connection is barely there. So how do you, handle such a scenario?
Yeah, the simple answer is it's not easy. To be honest, it is not, because these conversations are happening in pockets. These conversations are happening at homes. In some cases, they're happening, by the beach as well. So, holiday homes. We don't know when these conversations are happening. So it is going to be very difficult. But having said that, I think it is, at the end of the day, it is about training your people managers. And that is the most important aspect that I have seen, that once you equip the frontline managers to, let's say, observe patterns, if somebody's all of a sudden become very silent and there's a drastic shift in the behavioral patterns of the individual, then is it a cause for concern? So that is something that we advise our frontline managers to keep a check on. Or we also ask our frontline managers, is there like some kind of absolute resistance, not turning up on calls, avoiding calls with a particular person, always ensuring that even if it's a work kind of a setting, switching off the camera if there's a particular person on a call. Of course, you'll not be able to figure it out, but then, through patterns, you'll be able to figure out whether that is the case. Or there's a dip in performance that we see, absenteeism, frequent, let's say, late coming on calls, so on and so forth. So there are multiple things that we can observe. But is there an easy solution? I just want to be very honest. No, there is no, easy solution to this entire thing. It is going to be difficult. But at the end of the day, the soldiers who we have are our frontline managers. And we need to trust them. We need to equip them. We need to ensure that they are sensitized in observing these patterns. I think that is where that's the only way. That's the only way. That is education.
Okay, so my understanding from what you're saying is it is really important that you have good awareness sessions, sensitization sessions for these frontline managers, so that they're able to notice these, deviances and maybe even bring it to the attention of maybe the IC or the HR, and that is how they could possibly do it. Okay, thank you so much. That definitely answers that question. So, do you have any examples of maybe something that you've been doing in your organization of POSH implementation practices that have been effective in this scenario, the remote hybrid context? And if you can add in anything with respect to if you use technology also in any of these scenarios, you can maybe highlight about that too.
Sure, absolutely. So, it's been a journey. I would say it's been a learning for us what works, what does not, and it makes it complicated when it's hybrid and not just one mode. So what we're seeing is that, let's take an example. Let's say, theater-based awareness sessions. We used to do it in person, very, very effective, resonates with everybody. But all of a sudden, we are virtual. Some come to work, some don't come to work. Then how do you make that work? Then we had to shift the entire setup online. And now, do we do this online? Yes, we have both the options for people to explore, whether in person or whether online. Both the options are available to people. We see that online, I would say, participation is higher as compared to offline participation. That is one element. The second is we have open hours that our presiding officers often engage in. So there's a certain hour kept aside and people know about those hours. So they can just call the presiding officer, even if it's a query, because right now, like I mentioned, we are not sure of what constitutes sexual harassment in what kind of spaces. So if I have a query about that particular hour is publicized, they can call the presiding officer, get the query resolved, so on and so forth. We educate our IC members also to speak about it in their meetings, because we have representations from large teams, to ensure that there are a few minutes taken to speak about it in these large format meetings. One thing that I'm very proud of the team. What they're doing is not just restricting themselves to managers in the country, but they're also encouraging global managers. When I speak about global managers, managers who have team members in India but may not be otherwise based out of India, to participate in managerial awareness sessions, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who will help us when the need arises. So how do we then make sure that they are involved in these conversations, by using technology is going to be very important. In addition to that, there are times we just, encourage people that even if you're unsure, just drop a note, we'll figure it out, and use any of the channels, whether it is WhatsApp
Anytime.
or email or
Yeah.
whatever. Just drop a note, let's have a conversation and we will figure it out. And I think those are things that are working well for us. We wish, there are other technology solutions that come up which are far more creative than what we have, but for now, this works.
So now this works. Thanks, Shiv. So Shweta, have you used technology maybe in your awareness sessions, or have you seen any practice which you think you would like to share with us with respect to maybe effectively rendering, maybe like you said, when I was reading about your profile, awareness sessions, you conducting it remotely. So anything that you have introduced or um, that you would like
Yeah.
to share?
Of course, I think from the early on from the pandemic, we were the early adapters of Menti. And that was quite a revolution when
Yes.
it came, because one of the challenges with awareness session on sensitive topics like sexual harassment prevention is that employees find it difficult to ask questions.
Yes.
Often there's a fear of, what if the question I'm asking is, something that is not okay, or something that other people have understood and something that I don't understand, or they feel it's, they find it difficult to talk about it because we've not been taught how to talk about it. There's a certain stigma around it. So having a sort of a platform like Menti, basically something that assures anonymity of some kind,
Yeah.
helps, because we get some really interesting questions, and you can see that these questions are questions that are really close to the heart. They've been sitting with this question for a while. So for example, we've had employees asking us, what if I consider someone a friend and I pay a compliment to them, they're wearing something good, but I'm afraid that it might make them feel uncomfortable, right? So
Yeah.
what do I do here? And and that is very heartwarming to see, because basically
Correct.
that is the end goal of a sensitization, is the hope that employees are a little more mindful of each other and treat each other with, the kind of mindfulness that basically brings about this kind of consideration, right? Just because
Correct.
something is okay with me doesn't mean that it's automatically okay with somebody else. So a platform where employees can ask questions freely and express themselves freely has been a game changer.
Correct.
I also, as Shiv said, the pre-pandemic theater-based or role-play-based sessions used to be something that used to be a big sort of crowd puller. It was very, very sort of effective.
Effective. Yeah.
Yeah. Translating that into a virtual space has been a challenge, but
Yes.
I think more and more organizations are kind of successfully translating that into a virtual space, or using actors who are trained in virtual role play scenarios, etc. Generally, there's a big, now that more and more organizations are asking their employees to come back in or having a hybrid setup, there's a big debate about which kinds of sessions are more effective, virtual versus in person, in terms of effectiveness, in terms of logistically what is possible, etc. But I believe it's possible to organize and ensure virtual programs that are engaging and helpful. It is also a team effort. A lot of times people think it's the facilitator and the deck that is the most important, and the program that is the most important. But actually, what is also equally important is how the session is announced.
Yeah.
It starts right from the preparation for the session so that employees take it seriously, how it is done. So one of the, for example, if in an organization you have shift-based employees, for example,
Yeah.
asking employees to stay back after their long work day to
Long
attend
work
the
day.
POSH
Yeah.
session might not be very effective, because the employees might be feeling entering the session resentful,
Correct.
or not very happy
And
that
just be tired.
exactly, and because of the
Yeah.
tiredness they come switched
Yeah.
off. And
Correct.
often sensitization requires a little bit of energy to have an open mindset. So how the session is announced, how it is organized, the after session tasks, what I call the after session tasks, basically, what is communicated to the employees after session, sharing the policy or sharing a little quiz or sharing the poster, even, for example, sharing anonymous sort of survey to take a feedback from the employees as to how did they feel about the session, what are they left with, or in the anonymous survey, there can even be a question of, is there something they would like to share? In which case, they can reach out to this particular member of the committee just to sort of make it easier for them to kind of streamline the process. So it is, of course, the actual awareness session, and it is possible to make that very engaging and very helpful virtually, but it is also the whole ecosystem of the awareness program.
Thank you so much, Shweta. I just want to know, are there any questions online by our participants? Kanti, is there something that you have?
No, Yamuna, no questions.
No questions? Okay. So then I think we have 2 more minutes, and I want to ask this question for sure before we sum up. So Shiv and Shweta, it's for both of you. Are there any ways in which the organization can future-proof their POSH policies to handle the fluidity of this modern workplace? Is there anything that can be done with respect to your policies? If you could, and you'll have to do it really quick because.
Okay. I mean, I can give it a shot in 30 seconds, perhaps.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be clear about, the intent versus impact. I think we write our policies in a very legal heavy language. I think we need to move away from that and look at it in terms of something that a layman can understand. I think, that is something that we are trying to do as much as possible. The second aspect is, like I mentioned, move away from just compliance, look at the underlying aspects in terms of how are we looking at it from a, psychological safety perspective. I think that is going to be extremely, extremely important. And also look at what is the impact of this on the organization. So when I say that, I am also referring to, are the number of cases increasing, decreasing, so on and so forth. And don't fall for this metric called the cases are decreasing. I think that's a fallacy. Many a times people come and tell me, oh, there is nothing in my organization. I'm like, not possible.
Yeah.
Not possible. So if you have a large organization which is extremely distributed, you need to pay attention to metrics as well. And that is how, we will be able to create workplaces and future-proof our workplaces for doing the right thing. And healing is very important for both the person who is the respondent and as much as, for the survivor, if I may call
Absolutely.
the person. So in both cases.
That's a very empathetic viewpoint. Thank you so much. Shweta, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think Shiv covered most of it and covered it very well, but I just want to add specifically to the POSH policy, explicitly calling out all the things, giving a long list of things that does come under the workplace, even though it sounds, tedious. And yes, it will be a live list in the sense, as the workplaces evolve, the policy also has to evolve. I think that would be helpful, because then when the employees read it, it will be explicitly called out. So for example, explicit harassment via digital tools like Slack, WhatsApp, email, Zoom, or home offices, virtual meetings, company-sponsored groups or chats, all of these to sort of
calling it out. Yeah.
And also, I think culture-wise leadership role modeling, like
Yes.
if the leadership publicly supports and reinforces the POSH values and reads the policy, kind of talks about the policy, participates in the training. This is a huge, organizations often underestimate the impact of this, because as we were talking about parents, right?
Yes.
Employees watching and learning from what the leadership does. So I think that also plays a huge role here.
I agree, Shweta. There's always a trickle-down effect that I've seen. If the top management has a certain value, it definitely shows at the bottom. So very important. So I'm quickly going to sum up some things that really caught my eyes. We spoke about how she was talking about beyond boundaries, state and country. That's something that really caught my eyes. And you made a beautiful comment that consent once is not consensual always. And I think that is going to be a one-liner that's definitely going to be used at some point by us. And Shweta said something very, very interesting. She said that virtual is seen less than in comparison to a physical space. And I think that is a key takeaway for us, especially with respect to today's theme. So thank you so much. Thank you, both of you, for giving us these powerful insights. And thank you, audience, for being a part of today's discussion. Remember, the conversations we have here is just the beginning. True change requires continuous effort, a willingness to listen, and the courage to act. So whether we work from home, office, or somewhere in between, safety must travel with us. Please do join us for our fourth Connecting Voice panel discussion. We'll be talking about the date and the time and the event sometime in the future. But we'll keep pushing boundaries of what safe and inclusive workplaces can be. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you to the wonderful moderator, Yamuna. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Yamuna. Thank you. Thanks to
Thank
Shweta.
you.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.